company.
Yeah, but in a way, like, we would have project managed, things like that over a period of 100 days, the first 3 months, or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
But I suppose really from experience that we would have here, if you don't get it right in those first 3 months, you're going to have enormous difficulties out here afterwards, because it may not work, and lots of them actually don't work. I mean, we've come across situations where they've unravelled themselves,
and that's when executive decides, actually, this company is not for me. This new company is not for me. I don't trust. I don't like what's going on around here, and they decide to leave. And it's in the first year a lot of executives will leave.
Yeah. Okay, so looking at those practical interventions,
and there's implications for the reward systems at senior management level.
Yeah.
To keep people in, if you have a 2 or 3 year plan that you want to incentivize them to stay.
Yeah.
For, let's say, 1, 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So looking at those practical interventions that we're talking about, that's one they're talking about there, Frank. In terms of if you're looking at, you've got key people that you want, you're going to have to maybe make an exception for those people in terms of the reward, in terms of keeping them there. Other things.
Another thing would be, in the bigger ones, they appoint an integration manager. So they draw up a 6-month job description for an integration manager based on the specifics of a particular merger. Yeah. And they say, this is your role for 6 months. These are the key areas, strategic areas where integration need to happen. It could be systems, it could be processes, it could be culture, it could be various things that need to happen. You need to put structures in place to actually achieve this. You're going to report to a steering committee who might be the management team.
Yeah.
And that integration manager could be a key person inside the organisation who's respected and trusted, or it could be an external person.
Okay. When you look at that person, because that's probably an interesting one to do, if you look at that person and the sort of reporting elements that they're going to have to look at, it's going to be what? It's going to be looking at, the right people.
The right people.
Processes,
systems.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the three dimensions, I suppose, that you need to actually integrate to actually create a one entity out of two. And what we're all agreeing here is it takes far much work and time than you ever can anticipate that it's going to take. That's why you actually appoint somebody with specific responsibility. They may need some resources themselves to facilitate the arrangements that need to happen.
Okay. You're back into the model of the management for change.
You are.
Because you are, by virtue of the fact that you're merging or acquiring, you are now then setting off into that period of change.
Yeah.
And my experience tells me that even if you take in an integration manager internally, out of their normal job, and you put them through this process, I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, at the end of this process, they will go somewhere else. They will leave.
Yeah.
Because they find it very difficult to settle back, if they're any good.
Yeah.
Or they've been enthused by the process.
Yeah.
Or they've learned a whole new skill set.
Yeah.
Or they've gone through a whole transition.
That's right. Yeah.
They find it very difficult to go back into the routine of the organisation, the new organisation.
Yeah.
And you tend to get that turnover and churn and change of management.
Yeah.
So you might as well recognise it up front that it's going to happen sooner or later, and you identify if we're going to do it by a combination. And again, you're going to have you're not going to have, but it will be advisable to have somebody, a team, or somebody in charge of the transition period from going into the merger acquisition to coming out the other side, and what the things that you've identified have to happen through that.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you, at the end of that process, the management team that bring the organisation forward will not necessarily be the same management team that either identified the change or went through the change.
Yeah.
And when you actually look back on all these things that we've gone
Absolutely.
through, when you look back and you'll find that a new chief executive suddenly appears 5 years later or 3 years later, and he's a different sort of fellow than the guy who actually needed the skills to bring it through. So we're back into that, no matter which way you come from.
You are, and I think a third practical area which sounds so self-evident is the issue of communications. What I found in ones I've been involved in is that some companies won't communicate because they're saying, we don't have answers to the questions yet. We've got people out there, they're curious, they're suspicious, they're waiting, their morale is being affected. We know their questions, but we don't know the answers. And you don't communicate. I mean, what message are you giving to them by not communicating? I'm saying to them, if you have 30-40% of the information, go out and communicate that, and communicate what you're working on. But actually, what they need to see up there is somebody I believe in. They're credible. I'll accept they won't have answers to all of my questions at this stage, but by not communicating, you're doing much more damage. It's a key issue.
And one of the things we have to go into probably another day as well in relation to the whole cultural aspect. But before I do that, just a question come in. Surely in a merger there's always one dominant company. Is it a case that the less dominant company is the main contributory factor to a merger failing?
No. The less dominant company generally is not the main contributory factor. It's the reverse. If there's one dominant company, the success or not of the merger will be driven by the dominant company.
And how they treat the...
And how they treat the...
Yeah, and you might have a dominant company for 3 months or 6 months, but if 2 years later you have one dominant company and one less dominant company, you're actually on the road to failure because you still have two companies. So you might have a dominant company for 6 months or 1 year, but if, like I said, after that you should have one company. It's neither dominant nor inferior, it's one company.
If you do the things we've been talking about, and you set about it in that sort of way, you will have assimilation.
But there's going to be a dominant... Initially there's going to be that.
Yeah.
And there are great examples around this town here in Dublin at the moment, again, of companies coming in with the smaller company coming in and seemed to be the ones that got the dominant positions. Not necessarily saying they were the dominant company, they would seem to get the dominant positions in the end.
Almost reverse takeover.
Well, that's how it might have been portrayed, but that took a lot of management, and there are certainly some that I know of, financial services sector, if you could call it that, where it was done successfully, but a lot of work had to go into it because I've seen that where the smaller organisation was the one that got the larger positions. Listen, we're probably going to have to go. Just looking at where we're at the moment, and it's just after 9 o'clock. We've got there's more to this to do. What we'll do is we'll get somebody in. We'll get a guest in relation to this. Somebody who's been through this themselves, so they can share with us. We come at it from the outside as consultants and as project managers, and this we get somebody in who's been actually managing this themselves in over the next week or so, and we'll talk to them. So, in the meantime, if you have other issues that you want us to deal with, as we've always said this time, please send them in to us by email and we'll deal with them. And if you want to, we talked last week and the last couple of weeks about the fact that we're out having breakfast with people. At this stage, if anybody wants to do that, we can reiterate it again. There are a couple of dates probably left at this point where we can go out and deal with you in your own organisation, have a chat like we're having here about your organisation, see if there are issues that you need to get sorted, and sure we'll sort them for you if we can. Alternatively, if you want not necessarily to have us out in your organisation, we can webcast directly into you privately as well to talk about issues that you may well have, and again some people have taken us up on that. So interesting way of actually, I suppose, dealing with these issues. So in the meantime, at this time next week, from Mick, from Frank, from myself, Peter Finnegan, have a good week and slán go fóill.
So what about the Finnegan? What about 2 sides?